bueno, míralo. Bueno, si no tienes, que no tienes afán.
No, tengo porque yo soy muy aquí. O sea, nos toca salir de esta llamada.
Y entrar en la otra.
Hi, everyone. This is Jenny with Benchmark. We just wrapped up another session. We're about to start this one. If you'll give us just a minute. If everyone could please turn off their cameras as well as their microphones, that would be great. That way, when we record the session, there won't be any background noises. So again, if everyone could please mute their mic and turn off their cameras, we will start in just a minute. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, this is Kevin. I'm with Benchmark. Some of you have been to several of the classes that we've had today. Hopefully you've seen some things that maybe helped you out. Today we're going to talk for the next 30 minutes about the approval process. And before I actually get into the nuts and bolts of it, I do want to talk about it philosophically for a moment. When we first built this system back in, oh gosh, I don't even want to date myself, but back in 2003 roughly, end of 2002, one of the things that we encountered in talking with the program administrators is that they wanted to have control over what data was provided to the state, because this is a different type of system than you may be accustomed to. This is a global-based enterprise system that takes data from every program, every provider, instantly aggregates it into the system, provide aggregated reports at the state level, aggregated reports at the program level, and also allows the state to pull that information together so that it can be submitted to the feds. So at any point in time, the state level can run a table 4 and see all the data that has been entered in your system, and it's instantaneous. They can basically see everything that's been entered at that moment. So one of the things that we needed to make sure that we took care of was the idea of data consistency. When you have a system that aggregates data continuously, and that data can be manipulated, that data can be changed, that data can be modified, then that tends to lend itself toward a situation where okay, I'm hearing a bunch of people saying echoing. I don't know how to.
I am not hearing an echo, Kevin. I don't know.
Okay.
You might want to try to log out and log back in. Are you showing your screen, Kevin? Because we're not seeing.
No, I'm not. No,
okay,
I'm
I didn't think you were. Okay.
At this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Lisa, I would recommend logging out and coming back in because I'm not hearing the echo, so it's more than likely on your side. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So again, philosophically, we wanted a way to give program administrators the ability to be accountable and responsible for the data that goes in, because at the end of the day, that the program administrator is the person who's responsible for that data. They're the person whose job performance is considered based on the results of that data. So we wanted to make sure that the data that was submitted to the state that they could see was data that you as a program administrator had at least reviewed or had someone under your command review to make sure that it was, it passed the eyeball test. That doesn't mean that you're going to catch every single error that could possibly come through, but it gives you a much better opportunity for finding potential errors and correcting them before that data goes to the student record. Because once the data is in the student record and on the federal reports, there's less likely to be any major fluctuations if you've committed the data and the data's been reviewed. So that's the concept behind the approvals. I'm going to log into the system now. I'm logging in as a program administrator for my demo program. Program doesn't actually exist. It's one that we made up. And I'm going to go into the approvals first, but then I'm going to back out of that and show you something different in a second. So I'll go to approvals pending. The first thing that I see, these are things that have to be approved, okay? NRS registrations, changes to a student profile, and we'll talk about that in a minute, test scores, and class hours. Class hours is Anything past class hours outcomes is not going to be something that you'll approve. And state goals, you won't see those either. But class hours, you will see. Test scores, you will see. Interest registrations, you'll see. And profile changes, you'll see. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into one of my students and I'm going to add a test so that we can see the test score as it comes up. We just did entering tests 2 sessions ago, so I'm not going to belabor that point, but this is the process to enter tests. Test date. I did not put a test date in. It wants a test date. Perfect. All right, so now I save the test. And if I look at the student's record, I see that on this student, I have a test that's entered on 2/1/2022. It's an ESL level 5, and it was taken at Tecumseh Adult Ed. And if I look over here to the far right, there's an edit button, there is a delete button. Until this test is approved, you can edit and delete all you want to. You can make changes to it, you can get rid of it, whatever you want to do. But once it's approved, that if you look down to the test below it, that option goes away. Once it's approved, it's committed to the student record. So now when I go to approvals, and you find approvals on the left-hand side under navigation, you go to program management and approvals pending. And now I see that I have one test score that's pending. So when I click on that, I will see Mr. Babineau. This is his current test, the one that we're going to approve. This is his prior test. Why do we show the prior test? We show it for comparison purposes. If you had put a test in and he did a life and work listening, and I don't know the score ranges off the top of my head, but he scored a 101 and he was at level 2, and now you're a month later and he's at level 5, maybe that's something you want to go and take a look at. And you can click on the student's name to go right back to his profile and make edits to the test before you approve it. But we're going to say this is all good. Everything's fine there. In a situation where you have multiple tests that are listed in the approvals, you can click all. It will select everything, and I can submit. If I choose decline, decline will erase this test like it never existed. It will remove it completely from the record. So your options when you're on the approval page are to approve, to edit by clicking on the student's name, or to decline. And when you decline, it will erase the new test. It will erase that 215 on February 1st, 2022. We're going to approve it. It asks me if I'm sure, and I am sure. And now I'm going to go back to my student record. And I need to put more information because now I'm seeing multiple students, that's the right process. When I put in the search function, I only put portions of the name, and now I'm seeing everybody in the system who has portions of that name. I can't do anything with any of these unless I want to enroll them in my own program. I'm going to just do it. And there's my guy. And now I'm going to look at his test scores. And I see that this test was approved. It tells me who approved it. It tells me the date it was approved. You notice also that the ability to edit or remove that test is no longer there. So that what the approval process does is it essentially commits those pieces of data to the student record so that they will show up on the federal reports. One of the typical questions that we have when we're working with this a newer program for the first time is we'll have a program that'll send us a ticket and they'll go, okay, my student took a post test. They started at level 2. Now they're at level 3. I'm not showing an MSG. I'm not showing that they post tested. 9 times out of 10, or maybe probably 9.9, we'll go and find out, okay, well, the test had not been approved. And in order for the EFL to process, in order for the MSG to process, in order for the post test flag to process, that test has to be approved. Go back to approvals pending again. Now we have 13 class hours. I can look and see and all of these have different filtering functionality. If you wanted to see one particular person or one particular class or one particular location, you can sort it by meeting date. There's multiple options you can sort there, but there are always in the system different ways to get at the data, to see the information by sorting, by filtering, by clicking on different links, etc. So these are the hours that we entered for this class. And you can scroll down through those and take a look at those, make sure everything looks okay. And it's a simple process to approve all. Now, if you only want it, let's say that in the event of approving hours, you only want to approve the student hours. You want to leave the class open in case you have additional students to enter hours for. You can leave the class date open, but you can approve the hours for the students so that it will process for them. Once you approve the class date, however, that class is locked and you will not be able to enter any additional attendance on that particular date. And I'll show you what that looks like in about 5 seconds. I'm going to approve these. And now when I go back to my class management, enter hours. Now when I go to enter hours, which we talked about entering hours a few minutes ago, everything that's marked in green means that day is blocked off. That date has been approved. I cannot add any additional attendance to that particular date. If the date is open, I can still add attendance. I can add it for 6/6. I can add it for 6/7. I could add proxy hours on 5/29, but these dates are blocked off, committed to record. And that's really, I mean, I know we're only 15 minutes in, but that's really all there is to approvals. You go to approvals to look for new NRS registrations to commit their registration types to the system. You look for test scores to commit their test scores to the student record. And you look for class hours to commit the class hours to the student record. Profile changes, that's typically a situation where you have students who are in multiple different programs, and there's a change made to the student's address or there's a change made to the student's last name. We want to make sure that that information is correct. So you do have to approve those changes as well. And once again, I'll tell you that if you go to support and you go to downloads, which is on the left-hand side under support and downloads, there is a document in the bottom of other downloads that tells you how to manage approvals in the system. And I'll have to find it, but it is down here. How do I approve data? There is you click on that, download the document, and it gives you step-by-step instructions for how to approve data within the system. I know we're a little early, but there's not really much else to tell you about approvals other than the philosophical and then just to make the changes. That's about it.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions
Sure.
out here. One is, if something is declined, is the person who entered it notified, or does the approver need to notify the person when they decline something? So I guess if attendance was not approved or if something was declined, can you explain that, Kevin? And then there's a couple other things after you address that we can talk about.
There is no automatic notification currently that data was declined. You would need to notify the person who entered the data that they need to re-enter it. We do have a communications piece that will be added to the system very, very soon, hopefully by launch. And the communications piece will allow you to communicate directly with that user by email or text message to let them know that a change was made. But it does not automatically go back and notify the user that it was declined. No.
Okay, so there's a question. Sorry, I'm trying to find the other one.
Sure.
How are corrections made if there was an error to the hours entered on a date? So I guess there's a couple of ways. Really, you can not approve it and those can be re-entered, or they can be edited before they're approved, basically, right, Kevin?
Right. What you can
Yeah.
edit them during. You can edit them during. So if I
During
go
the
back
approval
to,
process. Yeah.
you would just go back to the class the same way that you entered hours, and I'll go back and do that real quick. Let's say that I'll go back to. I think I've approved all of them. Actually, that was the problem.
Yeah, I think you might have to, but essentially you can go back to the screen where they were entered and correct them.
As long as this is not green, you can make any changes you want to. I can change that to a 10 now, and I could go over to the hours and add a 10 to his record on that day. So as long as it's not approved, you can do anything you want to in there. Now, what happens if it is approved and you realize you need to make a change? At that point, you would have to submit a ticket to either us or the state. We're still working that out, but you would submit a ticket basically, and that ticket would say, I've made an error in entry for this class. I need these specific dates unapproved. And it's a very simple process. We have a method built into the system where we can go in and unapprove those dates for you, and you can go back and make the edits that you need to make. The same thing with a test. If you entered a test and you approved it and it was still wrong, you can let us know. We can unapprove the test so you can go back and make the changes.
There's a question. How can you see hours on a student's page if they are not approved? Actually, you can. It will show you
Yes.
whether or not they've been approved. There's a little green check mark or a red X saying whether it's approved or not approved when you look for a student. And then can you show us how to set up who approves my data? So approvals are assigned based off permissions and roles. There are certain roles in the system that have that approval process. If you have approvals to do so, there's a notification at the top that Kevin kind of covered during the orientation piece earlier that notifies you there are pending approvals. And then you can go in there and look at the approvals that are pending. So it is permissions based. Program administrators definitely have that option to approve. Someone had asked earlier about an approval role, and I think they submitted a request to ask about that. But that is how permissions are set to approve data. Yeah, so you see that green check mark on the page, it would actually have a red X if it had not been approved.
I could go and do that pretty quickly, actually. I'll just go and do that.
Someone asked about where do you submit to get permission service now. You actually need to talk to your program administrator because that would need to be approved by them in order to get that permission set a lot. And then if there's something that we need to get involved with to help with, the state would give us permission to do so.
And I'm moving pretty quick through this. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get back so I can show you what it looks like when you see one that's not approved. There's an example of an attendance history where he has 5 hours on 6/6 that are not approved, but all the data prior to that has been approved. So you can see that. You can actually see it on, there's a class hours where you can see all the class at the same time. You could see the same information there. The review hour section. If I go and look at this particular class, it shows me the dates for the class. And it shows me the hours that are approved and not approved. So it actually shows me that this date was not approved, but this date was the student hours. And there are more than one student in the class, that would show multiple students. And this one shows multiple students. So it shows that the class is approved and each of the individual students has been approved on those days. And Jenny, as Jenny said, there's an alert at the top that tells you if you have approvals that need to be managed. It pops here. It tells you there are data changes which need approval, and you can click from this. I'm pointing at the screen. You can click from that box at the top to go straight to the approvals from there, and it will tell you that there are things in there that need to be handled. And I think that's the gist of the approvals process. It's a very simple process. And again, we've had questions about whether or not it's for auditing purposes and those type things. It's really specifically designed to give the program manager, the program director, the person who's in charge of the data that comes from that program that's reported to the state, an opportunity to have themselves or someone under their guidance to take a look at the data that's going in and make sure that it passes the eyeball test. Anything else I can show you approvals wise? Anything else on the questions, Jenny? I mean, it's a very simple process.
I think we've covered it all. I believe we have, because some of the
Okay.
questions are the same. So I
Okay.
think we've covered that. Again, as far as approvals are concerned, the user has to have permission to do so for your program. Once that user has permission to approve the approvals, then everybody in they'll be able to see those and approve those. That it is intended for separation of responsibilities, so that someone who enters attendance is kind of a check to make sure that they entered that attendance properly. So in some cases, I realize that some of you only have one or two or three. I believe one person mentioned, people that will be using the system, and that they could, they may have permission to enter, but also approve their own data. So that's sometimes it works out that way, just depending on your staff. If you need access to request permission for approval, you will need to communicate that with your program administrators. They have access to set that up, and if they need help with that, they can submit a request to the state, and we will help them with that. Hopefully that answered your question, Catherine. Someone asked about the attendance sheet. We will be going over reports in a different section, and that's one of the things that we can cover for you. I'll make a note that we will cover attendance reports for you.
It's